So many people are feeling the effects of what the government has done, of what the banks have done concerning the interest rate and concerning the amount of payment that must be paid now for homes and properties and loans and credit cards. A lot of people are feeling like they're drowning under debt, drowning under the expenses that life is causing to them. Expenses for the house, expenses for food, expenses for clothes, expenses for cars. Everything's so expensive. Everything costs so much. The banks have put the interest rate up so much, and many people can't afford it. And many people are losing their homes. But let me tell you something. Your home is your fundamental right. Maybe you have a loan with the bank. Maybe you have a mortgage contract with the bank. Maybe you have credit cards that you can't afford to pay anymore. And the lawyers are going to come after you. And the bank is going to come after you. And they're going to want to take your property from you. They're going to want to steal your property from you under the guise of the color of law, under the guise of the color of right to do so. You miss one payment, not so bad. You missed two payments, not so bad. Oh, you missed the third payment, and we got you. We got you now. You broke statutory law. You broke your agreement. Now we're going to come after you. So we're going to send you some paperwork. We're going to call you to court, and we're going to come after your property. We're going to steal your equity. We're going to steal your home. We're going to put you on the street. Evil, wicked, and corrupt government. Evil, wicked, and corrupt individuals with suits on, playing the game. I warned everybody. I warned everybody 8 years ago that this was coming, and Canada was going to do this. This is not by chance. This is not by accident. This has been done by design. On purpose against you. On purpose against your family. Well, it's time to stand up. It's time to fight back. It's time to oppose the tyranny and the wickedness that this government is putting forth. If you want to stay asleep, if you want to stay complacent, then turn off this video and don't listen to the rest of it. But if you want to stand up for your rights and stand up for your property and stand up for your hope, then open your ears now and listen to what I'm going to teach you. The Declaration on the Right and Responsibility of Individuals and Groups and Organs of Society to Promote and Protect Universally Recognized Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms. It's what I'm coming under. It's what I'm coming to you under. Article 1 of this declaration says, everyone has the right, individually and in association with others, to promote and to strive for the protection and realization of human rights and fundamental freedoms. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to strive for the protection of human rights. You possess and you have a fundamental human right to have a home to live in, to have a home to dwell in for you and your family. This is your lawful right. This is your human right. And no one, no government, no statutory law, and no lawyer has the power or the right to take away this right from you. Step 1. Know the works of your enemy. So whether you have a credit card or a loan or a mortgage, what happens is if you stop paying this, after 3 months, they will lay a charge against you in a court of law, and they will claim that you are in default of the contract, and then they will try to come and possess your property, to take your home from you. The evil judge, using statutory law, will grant the judgment unto the lawyer, and say to the lawyer, you are entitled by law to take this property, to possess this property, to kick the people out of their homes and put the property for sale on the market to recover the money. And if you go about hiring yourself a lawyer to try and defend against the bank, to try and defend against them, more than 95% of the time you are going to lose because the lawyer is not going to argue properly in court. You're going to lose the case and you're going to lose all the money that you're going to pay to that lawyer. And once the lawyers for the banks get their judgment, whether by default because you didn't show up to court or because they defeated you in court, Then they're going to contact you and they're going to tell you, you got to get out of your home now. I'm entitled to it by law. I have a judgment from the judge and he's given me your home. Therefore, on such and such a date, I want you out of the home. Get out of there. And then they will send a bailiff to your house to tell you to get out, and they will change the locks on you, and they will kick you out of your own home, and they will take your property from you. But let me tell you something, that's against your fundamental right. But the problem is, you don't know this, and you don't understand this. So you're going to yield yourself to them. The fundamental laws and rights that exist in Canada, the natural law and the natural right of the man and the woman that exist in Canada, the human right that exists in Canada for you is there for you to stand under. So the bailiff is going to show up at your house and he's going to tell you, you got to get out of here. I'm entitled by law to this property and I'm here to change the locks and take possession of this property. What are you going to do? You're going to cower in? You're going to give up? You're going to give your property away? That's what you're going to do, right? Because they've got you conditioned to be afraid of them because you know it's not your right and you don't understand your right. So when you're put in that situation, they expect you to fold and to give in. But law protects you. Human rights protects you. The Criminal Code of Canada, Article 35. And this is where you find the expression of natural rights, of common law rights, being brought forth in the code to protect you from statutory law, to protect you from the government players. Article 35 reads as follows. A person is not guilty of an offense if they either believe on reasonable grounds that they are in peaceable possession of property. All right, so what's the qualification here? What was the qualification? Did you catch it? It said if you believe on reasonable grounds. It didn't say you have a judgment. It didn't say you have a court approval. It's talking about belief. If you believe on reasonable grounds. So you believe you have the right to keep the property. You believe this in your heart and in your mind. But you got to have a reasonable ground. Well, what's the reasonable ground? Well, I have a fundamental right to have a house, to have a home. And no one is allowed to take that right from me or to limit or abridge that right from me. And that's my reasonable ground. And that's what I believe. They believe on reasonable grounds that another person, this bailiff, is about to enter, is entering, or has entered the property without being entitled by law to do so. Oh, but hang on. I'm entitled by law to do so. I got a statutory court judgment against you. It says you have to give up your property. So I'm entitled by law to do so. Oh, no, you're not. You are not entitled by law to do so. You may think because you have a court judgment from a statutory court under statutory rule, under statutory law, that gives you entitlement. But let me tell you something, buddy. My natural rights, my human rights, my fundamental rights, constitutional law, foundational law, it trumps your paperwork. It trumps your position. So the bailiff is there, and they are about to take the property. They are trying to enter your property and take it from you. And you are going to commit an act to oppose them. And you're going to stand in front of that door where the locks are, and you're not going to move. And you're going to plant your feet there, and you're not going to move. The bailiff, or any police officer present with the bailiff, because they like to do that, right? They like to send some police officers with the bailiff to intimidate you. Well, that bailiff, he has no right to put his hands on you, to touch you, or to remove you from where your feet are planted. And the police also, they have no operation of law to cause you to move, to make you move from where you are standing. And if they do so, they've breached their duty. And if the bailiff touches you, then that is a physical assault. And you either have the police arrest him or her, or you lay an information against that bailiff. He has no right, no operation of law to touch you. He wants you to move from where you are so he may change the locks and take your property. But you have no obligation to surrender it. So that act of defiance, by standing in front of the door and not allowing them to get access to your home, to your property, the law says you are preventing the other person from taking or damaging or destroying your property. So you're preventing him from taking your property. Or if you commit an act by retaking the property from that person. So if they manage to get you out of there and change the locks, right? And you wake up to the situation and you go back and you take off their lock and you put your own back on and you retake your property, this is not a criminal offense. This is your right to do so. Criminal Code of Canada, Article 35, Subsection 2, no defense. Subsection 1 does not apply to you. So are you hearing this? It won't apply to you. You cannot prevent them from taking your property, and you cannot retake your property if something is not in operation on your behalf. If you haven't done something first, then you can never call on subsection 1. You can never oppose them. Subsection 1 does not apply if the person who believes on reasonable grounds that they are, or who is believed on reasonable grounds to be in peaceable possession of the property, does not have a claim of right to it. And the other person is entitled to possession by law. All right? So they come with the court judgment, right? And they are entitled to possession by it through the law. That's their standing. That's what they claim. We're entitled to possession of the property. I've got a statutory court judgment against them. If you don't have a claim of right to the property, if you have not created a claim of right to your property, then they are entitled to possession of it by the law. That's what this law is telling you. If you do not have a claim of right to it, and the other person is entitled to the possession by law, then subsection 1 is no good for you. You cannot call on your fundamental right. You cannot call on your natural right. You cannot invoke your human right. Subsection 1 does not apply if the other person is doing something that they are required or authorized by law to do in the administration or enforcement of the law. Well, that's the bailiff's position, right? And the police are going to try and take the bailiff's side, right? Well, they are authorized by law to come and take your property. Look, they're entitled to it. They got a statutory judgment against you. They're enforcing the statutory judgment against you. So therefore, you can't prevent them. You can't stop them. You can't get in the way. You're not allowed to do that. The administration and enforcement of the law is taking place here. How dare you step in front? How dare you try and put a stop to this? Oh, you're committing an offense. You're committing a criminal offense. Oh, no, I'm not, amen. Unless the person who commits the act, unless the person who is preventing the bailiff from taking the property believes, there it is again, right? It doesn't say you have another court judgment, right? It doesn't say you have the approval of the court, right? It says unless you believe on reasonable grounds that the other person is acting illegally. Oh, no, sorry. It's not what it says, right? It says unlawfully. And you are acting unlawfully because you are using statutory law to try and limit and abridge my fundamental human right to have a house to live in, to have a home to live in. And that fundamental right, it trumps your statutory obligation, your statutory duty that you are trying to get me to fulfill. And you are acting unlawful by trying to force me out of my home. I am holding my home under a claim of right, and I believe on reasonable grounds that I am entitled to my home because it's a fundamental right, and I don't care what your statutory court says. Thompson Newspaper Limited versus Canada. while individuals as a rule of law have full legal capacity by operation of law alone, artificial persons are creatures of the state and enjoy civil rights and powers only upon the approval of statutory authorities. Now, some of you may not know what that means, but that's okay. You don't need to pay attention to that right now. But the last part here, the individual. So you as an individual, may stand upon his constitutional rights. He owes no duty to the state. Well, they came with a court judgment. They claim that they're entitled by law to it. Well, you don't owe a duty to the state. You don't owe a duty to that judgment, since he receives nothing therefrom beyond the protection of his life and property. Oh, hang on a second. So those cops that show up with a bailiff, right? Well, they owe you a duty. And what duty do they owe you? They owe you the protection of your life and the protection of your property. That's the duty they owe you. So if that bailiff wants to put his hand on you, wants to interfere with you physically and assault you, well, the police owe you a duty because they represent the state and they are to protect you from assault. A bailiff has no right to assault you. And if they try to take your property, well, I'm holding this property under a claim of right. And I lawfully believe that I am entitled to the possession of it because I'm exercising my fundamental right to have a home. And no one has the right or authority in the law to come to me and to kick me out onto the street and to kick my family out onto the street. That is against fundamental human rights. The right to have a house to live in. And the police officer has a duty and an obligation to protect you in this situation because they took an oath unto the Constitution. They took an oath to uphold constitutional rights. Therefore, they must uphold natural rights. Therefore, they must uphold human rights. First and foremost, primarily, they are not to uphold statutory law above fundamental rights. The reasons of Laymer J. standing alone are strongly persuasive that a statutory enactment cannot stand in the way of a constitutional entitlement. So they're going to use the consumer statutory enactment against you. And they're going to use the enactments of the court against you. And they're going to get a statutory judgment against you. And they're going to try and take away your constitutional right, your fundamental right, your human right to stay in your home. But the courts have already said that you cannot use a statutory enactment or a statutory power to take away these rights. The judgment from the court has been created through statutory power. And that judgment from the court is a statutory instrument. And if you have an evil and wicked individual playing the role of a police officer that accompanies the bailiff and begins to take the side of the bailiff and say, "Sir, if you don't get out the way, I'm going to arrest you for obstruction of justice. If you don't get out the way and yield to the court judgment, we're going to arrest you." Well, that man is evil, and let him go ahead and do it. Because Weil versus Feast has already said, under a claim of right, in the case which the defendant raises a bona fide claim to do the act complained of and which forms the substance of the charge, the above observation also applies. A bona fide claim of right else the justice jurisdiction. The criminal court has no right to touch you. The criminal court has no right to proceed against you because you are standing under a claim of right, and the charge that the officer laid against you has no force or effect. And as soon as you're released from prison with no charge against you, you go back to your property under the Criminal Code of Canada, Article 35, and you retake the property from the bailiff. You break his locks and you put new locks on, and you go back into your home. Because that's what the criminal code says you have the right to do. Because that's your fundamental right. And the cop shop will learn very quickly. They'll learn very fast when they come to deal with you the second time. Whoa, we charged this man or woman already, and the charges didn't stick. Yeah, that's right, buddy. So you're rendered powerless. But you need all three ingredients to work here for you. You have to believe on reasonable grounds. Not you have to have a court judgment. You have to believe in your mind, and believe in your heart, and believe in your understanding that you're in peaceable possession of property, that I'm exercising my fundamental human right to my home, to my house. And second ingredient, that this home that I'm living in, that I'm dwelling in, is being held under a claim of right. And the third ingredient is that it is unlawful for you to come with a statutory power, with a statutory judgment, and try and get me to surrender my fundamental natural right, my constitutional right, my human right. The actions that you are taking are unlawful. Look in the description to this video. There's a link there for you to get a claim of recognition done by me to help you protect your fundamental right. You can waste your money on getting a lawyer to represent you and go to court and be fleeced by them. And in the end, the judgment will be produced against you. And they will force you out of your home. Or you can exercise your fundamental right the way the law provides for you. And you see what the law says, right? If you believe. Well, why would you believe such a thing? Well, perhaps you've been studying. Perhaps you've woken up. Perhaps you understand your position before Canada, and understanding that has created the proper belief in you. But if you have not the belief in you, then they're going to use the statutory power against you to take from you. And that's the way the law is set up. That's the way the law is. You must defend your human right. You must defend your fundamental right. No lawyer will ever be able to do so, because they are statutory creatures and they operate in statutory law, in statutory court. And the code says that you believe that their actions are unlawful. Well, why would you believe that their actions are unlawful? Well, because I believe now and I understand now that I have a fundamental human right. And that fundamental human right is I'm not to freeze on the street. I'm not to be kicked out of my home. My home is not to be taken from me. It's my primary right. It's my fundamental right. And it's unlawful for you to use a statutory power to try and limit and abridge my right. And the foundational law of Canada protects me from this. And that's why I see what I see in the Criminal Code of Canada. That's why it's been put in there for me